Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. It is 1,500 in Geneva. If I'm not mistaken, it is 1,400 in the place where the Glen is. So in United Kingdom, I believe this is politically correct enough. So today we have our first episode of what we called Legends. And we created in credit engineering this chapter of our online events to let our audience and let everybody interested to touch to the living legends of credit management. Today, I will make a quite long introduction. I did that in writing on social media, but since the football is involved, today I feel myself exactly as David Beckham. Not as a star of the football, but since I was following the Premier League quite long time in 1997, I do remember how David Beckham entered the football field of biggest Manchester Stadium and said after the match, I was playing with people whom I was asking for autograph just 6 months ago. So several years ago, our first meeting with Glen started from me asking him to sign the book I was using to study credit management and get results. So Mr. Bullivant, you're welcome to our today's event.
You are welcome.
Thank you. Glenn, you used to be called Mr. Credit. You used to be called president of ECMA because you were serving, I believe, several times as president of European Federation of Credit Management Associations. And you used to serve in different quite high titles in the Institute of Credit Management, which is now chartered. And you spent quite a long time serving as a credit manager. But with all this title, with all of the things you do, how do you define yourself in a short version? How do you express yourself? How do you feel yourself?
No.
So
simple as that. Professional.
Just professional, yeah. Yes. Like my favorite movie with Jean-Paul Belmondo, Le Professionnel.
Okay. I mean, I'm still heavily involved, even though I'm retired from active employment. I don't work for anybody, but I'm still a member of the advisory council and the executive board of the Chartered Institute of Credit Management. And in fact, I'm currently treasurer of CICM.
Okay.
And I am on the council still of FECMA, Federation of European Credit Management Associations. So I am still very active in the credit management profession. And I spend a lot of my time, not so much recently because of COVID and lockdown, but I spend normally a lot of my time lecturing, visiting companies, making presentations and so on, encouraging people to take up credit as a career. No doubt we'll come on to that later, but many people in today's environment got into credit by accident, or it wasn't their first choice or whatever, but it's becoming increasingly now a career choice for people, and that's what I am. So yes, I'm still actively involved, even though I'm older than Methuselah and should really retire, but I don't understand what the word retirement means. I'm still passionate about the profession, and I'm still encouraging people all the time to take part in
So you continue to serve, you continue to do what living legends should do.
Well, you know, what is interesting about this profession, perhaps unlike any other profession, Arnie, is that you are never too old to learn. There is always something new coming along. There is always some new angle. The last 18 months, for example, of the COVID coronavirus crisis has taught us all new skills to become comfortable with, as we are doing here today, a Zoom meeting. They're not new. We've done them for a long time, but nowhere near as intensively as we've had to do them over the last 18 months. There's been no other way of communicating. I would much rather, if I was going to be speaking to the finance director of a company or the HR department, I would much rather be there talking to them. But I can't do that. You can't do that. None of the people here today can do that. We can only do it this way. So this is a not a brand new skill, but it's a skill that we've now become much more adept at using, and it's the prime tool. It's not a backup tool; it's the prime tool. But it's an interesting concept as to where we take it from here. As we ease out of lockdown, as things get. I don't know what the debate is in other countries, but certainly there's a very heated debate in the UK about, I want to get back out on the road again. I want to go see people again. I want to go meet people again, So I don't know. Anyway.
But from other side, I remember that from my career and maybe your time, that was your active corporate career. Majority of job done by credit manager was happening by the telephone.
Oh yes, yeah.
So we used to normally credit management profession is something where telecommunication, whatever way it is something usual. And when we speak about international credit, with all due respect, you cannot just come to finance director of your US customer every week when you need it. You have to communicate.
No, that's very true. However, I would argue, and I've always argued, that a credit manager should spend far less time behind his or her desk and far more time out visiting customers. Now, I agree, if my customers are in the United States or are in St. Petersburg, I can't go there every day. But I must make a point, if I have customers in St. Petersburg or customers in Kiev or customers in Canberra, I must make a point at some time during my working year to visit them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just rephrase what I used to say to my team. The real place for credit manager is in the office, but not in the office of his own company, in the office of a customer, hand in hand with a salesman.
Yeah.
That's the proper job of a credit manager. Otherwise, his salary is wasted right there. Okay.
Well, you see, a credit manager is trained either by other people or by instinct to see what other people don't see. So if I come and visit you in your office, you might think I'm looking at you in the eye and talking to you face to face. But all the time, I'm in my peripheral vision, seeing what is going on around you, behind you.
Yeah.
How busy is your factory? How much have you got on the shelves? How happy are the staff? And you cannot get that on a Zoom call. You can only get that by being there.
Absolutely. But let's come back to the very beginning.
Okay.
Let's start from the very beginning. Because I know a little bit of that, and you already presented that, I just maybe ask you to repeat, or maybe you will give different version, but in my memories, I do remember how we started that nice discussion of how did you get to credit, and then Glenn explained what was, actually we are, that time you called us children, which is still correct to my understanding. And then actually we started to explain what was our first job. And then you presented your first job. So may I ask you to say a couple of words? What was your first job? Where did you start it with in your working career? We already know that, in your time, in my time, people were not coming to credit by choice. But
Okay, okay.
what I know from other credit managers, first job is always something really interesting.
My very first job, I was in the sixth form at grammar school, and I was looking for some work that I could do. And I became what was called a Saturday boy at Woolworths. And whilst I was at Woolworths, a friend of mine, his father was the secretary of a mutual trade protection association. Can you hear me, Andre? Because you seem to have gone.
I do hear you. I do.
Okay,
Hear
okay,
you. I
that's
just
fine.
removed all the possible obstacles.
Okay. A trade protection association in England in those days was an organisation that had been founded, usually in the 19th century, by groups of traders who were worried about customers who did not pay. And my friend got me a job at this trade protection association, updating by hand the association's ledgers. That is to say, recording things like default, county court judgments, bankruptcies, and they were all done on big ledgers. You can imagine something written by Charles Dickens in the 19th century. It wasn't very different to that. This is years before computerization. And that was my first step into what became the credit world, because the association, which had been founded in 1848, offered a service to its members of debt collection and credit reporting. And when I'd finished at college, I went back there to become a roving agent, credit agent. Mm-hmm. I would go into the office every morning. I was provided with a red Vespa scooter and a map of the city of Leeds. And it was my job to go around knocking on doors, collecting money, or making inquiries about credit worthiness. That's where I started.
But you were doing both.
I was.
You were doing both jobs, actually, getting assessing credit worthiness and cash.
Yeah, doing both. Yeah.
What was your age at that time?
19.
19. Okay, so you started earlier than me. Because I started in 2003, but that's different story.
2003.
No, that was 1996, and but yeah. Before that, I was a security guard. And then I finally managed to get a job with the bank in security service, but significant part of my responsibility was actually dedicated to checking customers in in-house visits and stuff like that, and collecting outstanding debts. And I was actually quite proud because I knew that the same job was done by one of the biggest Ukrainian economists in the history, Vadim Getman. That was his first job in the bank as well. So,
but what it taught me, Andre, going round,
yes,
was the basis of the credit function is nothing is what it appears to be.
Absolutely.
You have to go and see. So I mean, to somebody from outside, say, England, you might receive something from a company which has an address, I don't know, 184 Oxford Street, London, W1. And that sounds fabulous. until you go and have a look at the address. In London now, for example, I'm sure it's the same in all the major cities, but you can rent office space by the hour. You can have an address in Tottenham Court Road or Regent Street or Oxford Street, have that as your address on your stationery, but it means nothing. And that's what I learned very early on by going round. My area was Leeds. By going round Leeds, I was able to look at premises, look at houses. You can tell a lot about the occupant of a house on the consumer side. You can tell a lot about the occupant by the appearance of the house. You can tell a lot. Was taught to, look for washing on the washing line, children's clothes, family, overalls, a working man. All sorts of little clues that you picked up just by looking. Now, I know that's not possible in 2021. We can't do that now. But that's what my grounding was. That's where I started. So ever since then, I've kept in my mind all the time that whatever is down on the piece of paper in front of me, whatever is down on the screen, the inquiry, whatever it may be, don't take anything at face value. You go and check. And that means quite often going out and having a look. Now, sometimes you know an area very well. It's your patch. You've worked there a long time. I don't need to go down Oxford Street to tell you what Oxford Street is like. I don't need to go down Briggate in Leeds or Kirgate or Manningham Lane in Bradford or any of these addresses. I don't need to go because I know what they're like. But if you're asking me something specific about a particular, 182 Manningham Lane, the only way I can really confirm 182 Manningham Lane is to look at it. And like I said, by Jove, that's a well-maintained property. That's a nice place, that etc. And that was my grounding. That's where I started. And I've carried that with me all my working life. I'll tell you a little story, if I may, if we've got time. Yeah. I worked in printing and publishing for many years. And printing and publishing in the UK is a very difficult industry. All industries in the UK are difficult, but printing and publishing was particularly difficult. And I had to go to an informal meeting of creditors at a company in Essex. And I asked the sales manager for the area if he wanted to come to this creditors meeting with me. And he said, "What do I want to go to a creditors meeting for?" And I said, "Well, come along, it'll be interesting, and it's a day out for you, And we went, and it's a big factory with a car park, and very impressive looking. And we attended the meeting, and during the course of the meeting, it was clear from the information being given that this company had no assets at all. The building was rented. The printing machines were all either leased or hired. The only things they actually owned were things that they bought locally, like, I don't know, photocopying paper or whatever. The company had nothing. And when we came away from that meeting, I asked the sales manager what he thought about this credit and information that had come out of the meeting. He said, "Well, I didn't realize that they were in such a poor financial state." And I said, "If they'd phoned you this morning before we came to this meeting and placed an order, would you have taken that order?" And he said, "Yeah, I would." "Would you take it now?" "No, I wouldn't." That's what I do. Yeah. And that was an ally from that moment on. And at no time did he or any of his team ever argue with decisions that we made together. Not decisions that I made, but the decisions that we made together. And that's, for me, again, is another of those, let's go and see it on the ground and see for yourself. And that tells you the true story.
It sounds like like an old school, but
It is.
you were doing that much earlier than me. But quite recently, we had a discussion with a person outside of credit profession. We were discussing, by the way, consumer loans. That said, one period of time I was working for the bank as a kind of security officer. I mean, that time there was no credit management in Ukraine. In Ukraine, it still does not exist. But I mean, outside banking. But I had to check 10 consumers like this, and then simply give my conclusion. For both of them, I did only two things. I made a small visit to the place where they live, spoke with the neighbors, and came back. And then I came to the office. Normally, I mean, to the enterprise they were working for, and spoke with management, and come back. Wrote my conclusion. All the 10 loans were paid on time with no delay. Well, I don't believe this again. This is possible this time, or there would be people who can do that. But I just reconfirm that we really learn that much from that. But the thing I learned from you, from the book, as I don't know if you read what I wrote before this event. I was starting to speak with you before you even know me. But one of the things I've learned is that not only from you, from other people, from other professionals of credit, is that for the credit manager, it is inevitable to work with sales. And to me, this is an axiom. But what today? This is everything known to me, or kind of mind known so far. But what are the other duties? What are the what you found interesting about credit management on top of what you just explained? Because what you explained is quite interesting in terms of giving an advice, but you cannot do anything in this life if you don't love it. What did
you have to love what you're doing.
Absolutely.
That's the person. And I've always believed that if you worry about Monday morning on Sunday night, then you're in the wrong job. You shouldn't be worrying.
What do you mean under that?
But what I love about the job, and what I think every credit manager should do, is make it his or her ambition to unite the company for which he or she works. I strongly believe that I am not the most important person in my company. The sales director or sales manager is not the most important person.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in my company is the most important person. And the thing I look to stamp out wherever I go is the attitude that says, well, that's nothing to do with me. You know?
That's the worst thing, I believe. That's the worst thing that happened. This is not my job.
Yeah, it's not exactly. It's everybody's job. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of the company I work for? The purpose of the company I work for is to make money. Is to offer a service, goods, whatever it may be, with a view to making a profit. And in order to achieve that, I have to satisfy my customers. And in order to satisfy my customers, I have to attempt to do everything right. And if I don't do everything right, then I lose the right to be paid on time. So I've always said, right goods, right color, right time, right price, right delivery, right paperwork, etc., etc. Yes. All those have to be done. And if I fall down on one of those, then I jeopardize my right to be paid. I have never ever subscribed to the view that, oh, well, there's only one line on that invoice that's not quite right. You can pay the rest. No, the whole invoice has to be correct. If it's a 100-line invoice and one line is wrong, the invoice is wrong.
Okay.
And if the invoice is wrong, I'm not going to pay. Are you going to pay a wrong invoice? I'm not going to pay a wrong invoice. So it's my job to ensure that if that invoice is wrong, it gets put right straight away. But more than that, go back to the beginning and find out how come that invoice was wrong. Was it somebody in the pricing department hadn't put the right information onto the system? Was it somebody in the dispatch department who hadn't packed the right thing? Was it somebody in the warehouse who picked the wrong item off the shelf? 1,001 things can contribute to it being wrong. My job as credit manager is to keep the blood flowing, and the blood is the money. And if there's anything in this body that's not working properly, that's slowing the blood down, it's my job as company surgeon to put it right. And I get very, very short-tempered with people who say, well, it's nothing to do with me. It's everything to do with you. Look, if I come and visit the president of Ukraine, I expect that the man on the gate represents Ukraine, the gates of the presidential palace or office. The man on the gate represents Ukraine just as much as the resident inside the palace represents Ukraine. Yeah. So if I'm badly treated by somebody on the telephone or by the man on the security gate or whatever, look, let me put it this way. When I go into Marks and Spencer to buy a pair of socks, I am not in the least bit concerned as a customer what goes on in the warehouse, what goes on in the office, what goes on in. All I want is that pair of socks at that price. We have agreed now. Here's my money, or here's my card. Yeah, that's me as a customer. So me as Marks and Spencer, serving me as a customer, has to ensure that everything that goes on behind the counter, behind the shop, is focused on making sure that I come in and get the pair of socks that I want. That's the purpose. And anything that stands in that way is wrong. And that for me is the joy of my profession. I love going around the shop floor. I love going around talking to people on the machines. I love going into the warehouse, into the batch area, into the transport area, finding out what is it that I'm not going to tell you how to do your job better. You tell me what we think we should be doing in order to make it better. We don't listen to our people enough. We should listen to what our people are saying. When I was a consultant for many years, and consultants get a bad name. And I always used to say, I am not going to tell your bosses anything that you haven't told them. Only this time, they'll probably do it because they're paying me.
Exactly. So you pay, very often companies pay consultants just to hear what the people inside already told them. So your main love is taking responsibility for the final result. And, I just always taken that and putting through this everything what you said through myself. I said, I love my job because I am the last stand. There is nobody behind me. On my stage of the process, customer either pays or not, and I have to go to convince all the people in the company that in the end we would like to have cash. And customer votes with the bank account or with the cash, with everything. They either pay or not. That's simple. If we take your whole career and take two episodes of the biggest failure and biggest accomplishment, or at least most memorized, which sits deeply in memory. It does not mean biggest amount, it doesn't mean biggest scandal, it doesn't mean something, but what you believe was the bigger. Let's start with.
I'll start with a big event, if you like, and I'm going way back to 1985.
Mm-hmm.
In 1985, I was working for a working for a company in printing and publishing. We supplied the printing industry with what were called consumables, were printing plates, aluminium pre-sensitized printing plates. And they had a global sales force of about 85 people. I think we're about the third largest supplier in the UK, second largest supplier in Europe, and the third largest supplier in the world. So it was a big company. And we had a sales force of about 85. And I got wind. I should be careful about my English. I heard that there was a sales conference. They were going to hold a sales conference for the UK sales force, the whole of the UK sales force, in Madrid, in Spain. And I went to see the sales director and said, "I'd like to speak at your conference." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, two reasons. One, I think all you guys should know who I am and what I do. But more importantly, it's in Madrid, and I've never been to Madrid." And I think he took that as being a bit cheeky, but agreed. And so I went to Madrid and spoke to the sales force, and considered that to be a major breakthrough, because from that time on until the time I left the company, I knew individually every single salesperson in the company, from Land's End to John O'Groats, from Belfast to Birmingham. And I knew them all. And if I had an issue with any of their customers, or they had an issue, we knew who to talk to. So I couldn't put a figure on that in terms of money or saving or whatever. But psychologically, it was my first step in my aim and my ambition to have everybody, as we say in England, singing from the same hymn sheet. We're all on the same page here. And that was as long ago as 1985. And I still hear people today in 2021 talking about, sales. Sales. And I think, 40 years ago, we were saying that. And 40 years ago, we solved that problem. Why am I reinventing the wheel now? Please. So that was I guess my biggest, not biggest,
that was an accomplishment. But what
a memorable accomplishment. Yeah. Failure. You want a failure? How long have you got?
Well, that's your decision. You decide what is failure. I just want to reconfirm the.
Okay, I'll give you a
rule: errare humanum est. Everybody does mistakes.
I'll give you a failure. And I don't consider it a failure of mine initially, but I then consider it a failure of mine not to face up to it. I worked for a company which made gearboxes. Gearboxes for trucks, for wagons, for buses, cars, army tanks, warships. We made the gearboxes for 3 aircraft carriers, huge, great things. We had to knock a wall down to get them out of the factory. And I had a bad debt, or what was going to be a bad debt in Iran. Iran had bought or had ordered a number of tanks from the UK. The engines were made by Rolls-Royce, the gearboxes were made by us, and the body shells were made by Vickers, I think, or somebody. Anyway, so it was a big consortium kind of contract, and the gearbox part was about £2 million outstanding in the end, something like that. Which, going back a few years, was a lot.
Still a
And
lot.
it's still a lot now, of course, but it was a lot then. And I'd done all sorts of work in the credit department, and we'd got all our information, and we'd got the letters of credit, and we'd got all sorts of things. I knew we were going to be paid sooner or later. We didn't have credit insurance in those days, but anyway, cut a long story sideways, I was sent for by the managing director. And I picked up all my files in respect of the Iranian gearbox contract, knowing we were going to have a bit of a discussion over this £2 million, because I knew it hurt, and we weren't going to get this. We weren't going to get paid when we wanted to be paid. We would be paid, but I think it was if I remember rightly, it was a 25-month. That's a 2 years, 1 month confirmed irrevocable letter of credit. So I knew we were going to get it, and I couldn't discount before anybody shouts. At that time, nobody would discount Iranian letters of credit. Anyway, he sent for me, and I got all my story ready, and closed the door and stood in front of his desk. He wouldn't let me sit down. I stood in front of his desk, and he looked up and he said, "You've rearranged all the desks in the credit control department." And I said, "Yes." Well, I don't like it. And I'm looking at my file, £2 million worth of debt on my arm. And I'm stood in front of this managing director, and all he can do is whinge about the desks in the credit contract. I don't know, are you going to put them back as they were? And, okay, I'll put them back as they were. My failure, Henri, was not to challenge him on this 2 million and not to face up to him on the desks in the department. My weakness was to say, I'm not going to work for a company like this anymore. If that's what's most important to him, I'm going to go somewhere where I am appreciated. I shouldn't have done that. I should have stayed. I'm glad I didn't, because I moved on, but it was a failure for me. He won, I didn't.
Yeah, and I believe this is even worse than the bad debt, because I still, psychologically, I still remember my first and the only bad debt I've lost, and I still understand that there were quite other things, but not bringing credit
Yeah.
to the attention of top management, and bringing its importance. That's what we that's what is the significant planning for all of us, not to be allowed at the table. Not to be allowed to sit at
yeah
and speak.
I think I've always prided myself. I'm just thinking of another situation. I've always prided myself on being reasonably calm, reasonably in control.
Mm-hmm.
But I did once very foolishly lose my temper. I got very, very angry with a boss, a European boss who come over from the European headquarters in Germany, and not to put too fine a point on it, he was unbelievably offensive, and I just lost my temper with him, and I went home.
Well, we don't need to explain that to a Ukrainian man. We fail this maybe 3 times a day comparison to you, but I do learn that things you can allow inside are never allowed outside with the customer or supplier.
Yeah.
That's and by the way, one interesting thing just to exchange. When I had my first subordinate, in our culture in Ukraine, we are allowed to speak, even to speak loudly. It's quite often happens on both sides, like manager and subordinate, everything. But even from with the sales, we used to have quite loud discussions. It was not really an offensive; that was a dispute. But what I was explaining to my first subordinate in Ukraine, I said, you can say whatever words you believe are correct about situation, but if you say something even similar about the person, him or herself, this would be your last word in it.
Yeah.
I mean, never get personal.
No.
Absolutely. Well, Glenn, I knew you did a quite interesting corporate career, but every career comes to the end. And if I would have a chance to look like Cher, this famous singer, I will ask you, do you believe in love after love? But since I know that you are successful in credit after credit, let me little bit adapt my question and say, how did you find a success in credit after active role in credit management, and how does it happen? Credit after credit, what beauties exist? I mean, we all know that credit management is an interesting thing to do, and there are lots of interesting things you can do, but active career for everybody sooner or later ends. And some people decided to retire, which is unclear to you, unclear to me as well. I don't know what I will be doing if one day I will have to retire, because I do love credit as well. And actually, I'm asking for advice. So, how did you find yourself in credit management after active corporate or business career? How did you find an application of everything you knew you can, and all this?
Just a question of giving back. Just a question of two things that credit taught. One, it taught me to be curious all the time. And outside the world of credit, I'm curious. I like to know things. I'm an avid reader. I'm an observer. I guess in credit, I've never been one of these people that sits in an airport departure lounge, tapping away at my iPhone or my iPad or whatever. I sit and watch the world go by. I'm curious about people. So that was something that credit taught me. And I was always grateful to what I'd been given by other people. You never achieve anything solely on your own. We talk these days about self-made this or self-made. You've always got somebody that you can look back to and say he helped or she helped or I learned from them. And when I stopped active credit management in a paid role, I looked to see how I could give back to people something that I'd achieved over the years, which is why I joined the advisory council of CICM. I took up teaching in either online or in college on the Institute Credit Management courses. I go round to, I've got one in Leeds when they start again in September, been invited to go and inspire the students, whatever that means. But just giving something back all the time. And it gives me great satisfaction now because I am so old. I can look at people in the profession and go, he was a student of mine. She was a student of mine. I've got one I can think of just off the top of my head. I did a course at a company called Carlsberg, the brewery in Leeds, Carlsberg Technic. And during the course, every single person on that course was made redundant because Carlsberg were closing that brewery. But they paid for the course, so we carried on. One of those girls is now a very high up regional manager with Barclays Bank. She was a student of mine. That's what gives me great satisfaction. And so, if you want to call that retirement, then it is, and it isn't. It's just giving back something. I can remember. Let me tell you just a very quick little tale. I can remember.
Free.
I remember going way, way back when I was at the old Trade Protection Association, going to a branch meeting of what was then the Institute of Credit Management. There was a local meeting being held at the Griffin Hotel on Boar Lane in Leeds, and it was a presentation on insolvency. It was a mock meeting of creditors, and it was being run by a guy called Tony Armitage, and it was an interesting meeting. And at the bar afterwards, he just said hello, and we had a drink, and he gave me his card. 2 or 3 weeks after that, and I received in the post at work what was then called a Section 293 notice, and it was a notice of a meeting of creditors. And I've not had one of these before. This is very, very early on in my career. What do I do with this? And I gave Tony a ring. I'd got his card. I rang insolvency practitioner, and I said, "You won't remember me, Tony, but my name is Glen." We met at the Griffin. Yeah. I said, "I've got a Section 2. Send it to me, Glen. I'll deal with it for you." Still know Tony to this day. Yeah? He's still a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Credit Management. And I've always said, if you wanted to know how I succeed or how anybody succeeds in credit management, don't tell anybody. I hope nobody's listening. I've always said, I'll never turn anything away, because if somebody says, "Do you know how to do it?" I will always say yes, on the basis that I might not know, but I do know somebody who can. So if you send me a problem, or from over there in Switzerland or Ukraine or wherever you are, Glenn, you're in England, you can do this. No, I can't. I know somebody who can. And that's how you get on. It's not just what you know, it's also who you know. And that's not being elitist. It's being factual. And somewhere a professional institute or an organization like TICM, like FECMA, gives everybody who is in credit in Europe, anybody who is in credit, got access to help and assistance and guidance. They've got colleagues, whether they're in Belgium, Ireland, France, wherever, or in exactly the same situation as they are. No credit manager should ever feel that he or she is working in isolation. They're not. If you think you're the only one with the problem, let me tell you, I can give you another 100 in different countries who have got exactly the same problem. That's what I consider, to me, is the beauty of this profession, and why I've loved it all my working life. And I've no intention of giving up. And look, I'm not up to date like you are with the algorithms and models and computerization and so on and so forth. I know there are different things, digital analyses, and all sorts of things that can go on in the credit world. How do you report performance? Is it DSO? Is it sales? Whatever. But I tell you this, Sir Francis Drake in 1580 something or other, if he was here now, he would recognize a marine bill of lading. He would be bewildered as to how it was produced, but the format, the content, name of vessel, cargo, is what it's been for years. Credit management is no different at its heart, base, its roots now than it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Yeah, Charles Dickens talked about it. Mr. Micawber, yeah. So
And,
the way we do things and the apparatus and the tools we have to enable us to do things, yes, they're completely different. But the basic format of credit, from the Latin to trust, I've done this for you, you've promised to pay, are you going to pay? And it's as simple as that. Yeah.
with all the complication, everything we have, grant and credit is the word of mouth, like the problem we got promise. Nothing prevents us from that. But well, we are coming closer to the whatever has a beginning has an end. But we didn't finish. We were just coming closer to the end, and I'm getting a bit jealous already. I just wanted to ask if I know you are giving advices, you are consulting, you are providing lots of advices, and I feel it on my own. I know that by my own skin. But if you look at yourself, whatever number of tens of days of your years ago, just in the beginning of your credit career, and think what would be, let's say, and give just one and have a chance to give one advice to, I don't know if it is possible to be more successful in credit than you were, but just to give something maybe not better but easier, to avoid one couple of mistakes or something. Like, what would be your advice to your younger self?
Believe in yourself. Don't doubt yourself. Believe in yourself.
Thank you, Glenn.
You're going to be wrong, but don't be afraid of being wrong. I think if you have a family and you brought up a family, and your little boy or little girl wants to ride a bicycle, and he or she falls off that bicycle and hurts, you don't say, right, I'm throwing the bicycle away, lock the bicycle. What you do is say, right, put an elastoplast on where you've grazed your knee, but let's get back on the bicycle and try again. And I think too many people in the credit profession hide themselves. And the most successful credit people, in my opinion, are prepared to believe in themselves, to push themselves forward, and to take the knock when it comes, because it will come. Nobody's right every time, all the time. I'm bound to be wrong, but don't get back on the bike and try again. Get back on the bicycle and try again. So I would say to my younger self, don't be shy, Glenn. Don't hold yourself back. If that's what you believe, go for it.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Just as rephrasing that, good advice from the boxing, like fight one more round.
Yeah.
Or I think this is Einstein quote who says, "You never fail until you stop trying." So, but believing in yourself, I can reconfirm. Just I'm allowed only to echo. Really, that's important.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, we, together with Glenn, whatever it is said to me, we finished with our prescribed questions. I believe we got another 5 or maybe a bit more minutes to answer questions. But first question will come from myself, because I was skipping it for today. I joined ICM when it was just an ICM. And just recently, the ICM became Chartered Institute of Credit Management. And thanks to your explanation, I understand that this is really a historical event, because with that simple word, chartered, we as credit management became really a separate profession, separate from accounting, separate from finance, marketing and everything. We just became equal among equal. And one of the interesting things, so we started today's discussion about all these curious things about England. And I did, I don't know, maybe several hundreds of readings of the word charter. And
it comes from, it's a medieval expression.
I just wanted to understand the meaning, and that's why I'm so careful in words. I understand that finally, Institute of Credit Management and profession itself received the Royal Charter, but the word chartered means, does that mean that Institute of Credit Management could now be called Her Majesty Institute of Credit Management?
No.
Okay, so correct me, please.
It's a royal charter. It's signed. It's signed by the monarch, but it's just a recognition of professional status, and anybody can apply for chartered status, any profession, But it's the fact that it's signed by the monarch means that it's the higher end of government that has to agree that you've met the standards required. It goes in front of what's called a Privy Council. Privy Council is the group that advises the monarch, and the Privy Council says this fulfills the standard. All it does, in effect, is, as you've just said, is put the credit management profession in the same category as accountants or lawyers or architects. It becomes a recognized profession. And we've always regarded it as a recognized profession, but now it's an officially recognized. That's what it means. It is officially recognized. It's not something we could go along back in 1990 or 2000 and say we are profession. Well, nobody recognizes it as a profession. You cannot not recognize it as a profession because it is chartered.
Okay.
That means that
so this is not like Her Majesty Institute. There's nothing with the Queen, with everything. Is just like, okay.
No, she hasn't come along. Bless her. She hasn't come along and joined any meetings, but that's all. That's all it means.
Okay. I got my answer. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I believe you have questions, so please raise your hand, and if you would like to ask a question in voice, because Glenn was speaking quite long, and he might have his cigarette.
If anybody wants to ask a question, but not on here, but wants to send it to you by email,
Sure.
I'm more than happy to answer. But I think Sean has.
Yes, Glenn. First of all, thanks very much for that, Glenn. Thank you very much for that. And as you were reminiscing there, I was trying to think of comparable stories across, and yes, there were a few. But really, where I'm going with all your breadth of contacts and where you go out at the moment, it's the career paths nowadays in credit. they don't seem to have changed too much. The paths themselves, where people are working, are different. How they're working is different, whether they're in outsourced centres or within small companies. But are you seeing any change to those career paths? Any new sort of insights into that for people? I suppose many people that we sort of encourage to get into it, it's very difficult to encourage them in careers unless they love it, and that does stand out. But if you're in the middle of a outsourced contact center doing collections, how to persuade those people to take credit management as a career is that little bit more difficult when they're on such low salaries and such numbers involved. But what are you seeing out there?
Well, I'm seeing the same thing, Sean. And with respect, I don't think that the call centre in the outsource environment is fertile ground.
No,
necessarily. But what we are seeing in the UK, and it's grown over the last 2 years quite substantially, is the requirement now being made by potential employers themselves for what they are called qualified practitioners. In other words, a recognition, and this has happened, it is one of the great results of chartered status, of course, is that it's increased the exposure, if you like, of the value of a reputable qualification. And so, for me, the career path has been boosted by chartered status and also been boosted by apprenticeships. When we launched a couple of years ago a credit apprenticeship, the take-up was small to begin with, but it was the beginning of a growing movement, and that's now bearing fruit. And the other thing that we found in the UK through what used to be called QICM, but is now CICMQ, the quality accreditation, we are finding that within companies, where as part of the training update program they give to their people in terms of GDPR or compliance to legislation and so on, they're also giving training support for advancement within the credit profession themselves. So there are more qualified credit personnel in CICMQ companies than there ever were before. It used to be just the manager or the team leader that was qualified. Now it's the team leader, 3 supervisors, and 4 clerks studying. So that's there is a definite career path, plus the apprenticeships. And indeed, funnily enough, you may or may not know, but within the institute itself, we have ourselves at the Watermill taken on 2 apprentices. So we've got 2 apprentices. We've got 2 apprentices working for the Chartered Institute of Credit Management.
Practicing what you preach.
Exactly, and they are as keen as mustard. Absolutely. One of them's I don't know he's 18 or 19. I can't remember. He's running rings round the IT people at the Watermill. He's so IT savvy compared to that. And of course, what he's bringing is that expertise plus an eagerness to learn about the profession itself. He's going to go a long way, that guy. Yeah. So I agree. I think, with respect, I think Ireland is in a rather different position in many ways because you're very big with call centres and outsourcing compared to the UK. Would that be right? Would I be right in saying?
Yeah, relative to our size, there is a lot. Yeah. There's been some sort of changes in the industries a few years ago, which I do hope reverses out. Although there's a lot of outsourcing operations for major contracts, utilities, and very large operations. And within that, they have tried to put the collections process, which is effectively within a customer service process, which you are right. It's not fertile ground for career credit managers. And I don't think myself the results from what I know of them are pointing towards it's the right way to put collections. We do prefer, my own personal preference, of course, is to have it in-house or with DCAs if it has to be. And there is a choice made by the individuals that they are going into collections, either by joining the DCA or doing the credit team within companies. But we are jealous of that chartered. I mean, its use has spread beyond the UK, and it is a sign of professionalism that we've been striving for years. It's a recognition of it. We don't have an equivalent here, unfortunately, but we will take advantage of everything.
Well, I think that's right, and I think you'll find, Sean, if you speak to colleagues in countries like Poland and Hungary, who are also and Czech Republic, who are also very big in outsourcing, they have the same lack of fertile ground, as it were, because they're in the same sort of environment. So I think my own personal view is it will it will change. Yeah, I think there will be a move back to. We've already seen a little bit of that in the UK, even in IT departments where much went out to India. Some of it started to come back, and there's a couple of reasons for that. In that, one of the reasons for outsourcing in the first place was it was cheap and cheerful. But as wage rates and working environments improve and go up, it becomes less of an economically attractive. And in fact, one of the big banks in the UK has brought everything back to, I think it's Newcastle upon Tyne, back to the northeast. We've closed one of them. So I don't know. It's one of those.
It is one of those conundrums on it, and my experience with them, even though I did sort of get engaged with some of it to try and improve it, my own belief is that its performance is I suppose compromised a bit by the fact of how it operates within that customer service outsourced sales environment, and that'll be the controlling part of any contract and budget. And
the big danger, I think, and we'll go back to you, Andrew, in a minute, because I know you're getting a little bit agitated there.
No, I'm okay. I'm absolutely okay.
The big danger in all matters outsourcing, and I'm not against outsourcing, so please don't get me wrong. But one of the foundations of a good relationship between a supplier and the customer is that route through the accounts receivable, cash allocation, customer service relationship, as it were. And anything that goes might endanger that can be a problem, and you have to be very careful. In other words, if I'm a manufacturer of tires, and I was to outsource my accounts receivable to somebody in Hungary or in Malaysia or in Ireland, I would want them to know all there is to know about manufacturing tires and supplying tires to the motor industry. I don't want them to treat my customers as just numbers on a ledger. I want them to feel that they are me when they are speaking to my customers. Does that make sense?
It does a lot, Glenn. And I suppose going back to where it originally was, the career paths for them, they have appeared to stay the same. There's no magic new way. The operations are different. Their breadth of knowledge is different. The background processes are different. But the professionalism of the industry is the big thing that makes it that sort of that key and that sort of that extra piece in the future that will drive this. People coming out of college, out of school, looking for a career path.
We're not
the UK thanks to Chartered, it's there, but we have to pick up on that as well.
We're not credit managers. We've never been credit managers. We are actually customer service managers. Yeah. We've always been in charge of customer service.
Yeah. I do agree. I do know,
Yeah.
you know, the best sales come out of the credit teams and the credit managers, and that's what they're there for.
I think we've got some other questions come through, George.
We've got a couple of them. I will sound them because that's my only job today. What are the best ways of improving credit management in manufacturing sector?
The first thing I would always do whenever I went to a new company, whether they were manufacturers, and most of the companies I work for, to be honest, have been in the manufacturing sector. One of the first things I've always wanted to do is involve myself in the manufacturing process. That is to say, going down onto the shop floor, walking around the machinery, talking to people, finding out what it is that we are making. How are we making it? What are the pitfalls in what we make? How do we pack it? How do we ship it? If I can understand, I know this is going to sound really bizarre. People are going to say, "No, I can't do that. I work for an oil." You know, I'm just answering the question as I see the question given to me. I'll give you an example of something. I was once headhunted by a big company who sent for me, tempted me with a large salary and a car. And I went for the first interview. And it was all right. And then I went for the second interview, and it was with the finance director. And he said, "Right, what I want you to do then is I want our day sales outstanding reduced by 10 days." And he gave me a date. "Can you do that?" And I said, "No, I can't do it. I'll try to do that. What I can guarantee to you, however, is I can make it worse. And I'll make it worse because the only way I can do what you want me to do is find out in detail what it is that you do now. And when I've satisfied myself that there are a number of areas of what you do that are wrong and I can change and we can improve it, and I'm sure I can get your DSO down by 10 days in time, but not in 3 months or whatever the thing was, or 2 months or whatever." But my answer to the question of manufacturing sector is, what do we make? How do we make it? How do we resolve a customer query? Where do I go when a customer comes back to me saying, "I've not paid this invoice because," I know, because I know what the company is, how it works, where the bottlenecks are, where the problems are. I know where to go. And just involve everybody. A very key thing that the company I work for did, and I would recommend this highly. We made printing plates for the printing industry, and we had 95% of the newspaper industry in Taiwan. We had most of the newspaper industry in India. And what we did from time to time was the sales rep, the whatever his title was, we didn't call him sales reps, and I can't remember now what we called them. But when he was visiting Hindustan Times in Mumbai or wherever it was, he would take with him somebody from the shop floor, one of the workers, one of the foreman or the reel man or whatever, and would show this reel man at 3 o'clock in the morning when the newspaper presses were running. That's our product. That's how it was used. That's why it's important that it's made properly in the first place. That's why it's important that when he takes the pack off the shelf and he opens it, everything inside that pack is perfect. In other words, involve everybody. And that was a good way of improving the whole process. Encourage everybody to be able to take the dinner lady to visit a customer. I'm not. Why are we so keen on having people in certain areas doing certain things and not being involved in other things? Look, An accountant can count beans. A credit manager can nurture the growth of beans. I don't know whether that answers your question there.
So,
Yeah.
because I used to be, my first diploma, I'm an engineer and I know what production means. And I could say, and this actually, I took that attitude, again, continuing to echo you, I took that attitude of production and delivering goods to a final customer. This means that we need to apply that holistic culture.
Yeah.
Make sure everyone works, as a human body, or everything is perfectly interconnected. That's why we are able to live. But you made me curious with your answer. So when you answered to a potential employer that you cannot improve so did you get the job?
Yes, I was offered the job.
Okay. Good.
But actually, I turned it down. And funnily enough, about 6 months after, the company failed. So they were, you can tell when a company is trying to put itself right too late. It was doing it too late. If it had come to me a year before, we could have worked together, and would probably have done. Funny enough, it was a computer company as well. So anyway.
Yeah. Time is also very important. Yeah. Sometimes we do it too early. Sometimes it is too late.
And you see, you can also say, look, if you want me to do that job in 2 months, Andrew, I'll do it in 2 months. But do you want in 2 months' time to have the same number of customers that you have now?
Well, I got, I mentioned that in one of my articles. It's about years. So once in the very beginning of my consulting career, I had a discussion with a business owner, and I did ask him if he needs any help with his receivables. He said, "I can make my receivables perfect tomorrow, with no help." But there is only one problem: how much sales it will cost me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Receivables could be perfect. The thing is, they have to support sales. That's it.
Well, if you remember the book, Andre, I've always used this. That my own favourite quote of my own is that the role of the credit manager is to promote the highest volume of profitable sales over the shortest period of time with a minimum of bad debt. And the emphasis is on profitable sales. It's not the credit manager's job to say no. It's the credit manager's job to find a way of saying yes, profit. Simple as that.
Absolutely. Otherwise, there is no sense neither in receivables nor in us.
Okay.
We got a question from our homeland, from Ukraine. How would you predict the future of credit management and managers as a part? Won't they be assimilated by financial management or became a part of sales, especially taking into account significant growth of CRM and same kind of software? I don't believe this is the question about whether computers will replace credit managers, but how do you see the future of credit management?
Well, to a large extent, the factor of assimilation into financial management or assimilation into sales and financial management has happened already. It's part of what we are and what we do. There's nothing there. Computers will replace. You won't be replaced by a computer, Andre.
But maybe.
If you ask any credit manager, one of the lessons that we have learned over lockdown is quite simply this: we have been through all sorts of situations where we have nothing to do ourselves except look at all the digital financial information, tick all the boxes, And on the basis of those boxes being ticked, the company gets the credit. That's always been the case, except that when you're able to visit, especially in the case of a large contract or whatever, you've been able to say to yourself after you've come away from that company, yes, all the boxes were ticked, but there was something wrong. I felt it, I smelt it when I went in, people were unhappy, people were miserable. There wasn't any enthusiasm in that company. There was too much stock on the shelves. There was a lot of competitor stock on the shelves. All sorts of information you come away with after a visit that you will never get in pure financial information. Now, it may well be that 90% of the work you do can be fully automated. If you work on the basis of the Pareto principle, which is what most companies operate, 20% of your customers account for 80% of your business. Those 20%, those top 20% of your customers deserve and require you. Not a computer, not a machine, not a spreadsheet, not an algorithm, you. Now, and as the question of simulation into sales or financial management, I'm never concerned about who my boss is. I don't mind whether I work for a finance director, a managing director, a sales director. What I do insist upon is that if you're my boss, Andre, now at this moment in time, you're my boss. And I don't think we should supply this customer. And you think we should supply that customer. And you have the right to overrule me because you're my boss. All I insist upon is that if you exercise your right, you also accept the responsibility, because responsibility is linked to rights. I might sit back and go, "Oh, you're going to make a fool of yourself with this," and that's your problem. That's your responsibility. What I won't accept is you overruling me and leaving me with the responsibility of that debt, because it wasn't my decision, it was your decision. So I would say, in answer to the financial management and sales and so on, it doesn't matter, providing responsibilities are clearly laid out as far as the operation of a company is concerned. I'm not going to get precious about you're the managing director, therefore you're the managing director, you have the right, but you also have the responsibility. And you owe it to me, human being to human being, to accept that responsibility if you take it off me. If you give me that responsibility,
yes,
and delegate it to me and say, your responsibility, Glenn, fine. That's I'll make a mistake, I'll be wrong or whatever, but that's my responsibility. The moment you use your right, you also have to take that responsibility. So I don't think we will ever replace the 20% of customers who account for 80% of our business with pure algorithms and spreadsheets and Excels and AI and all the rest of it. We'll have as much digital and financial information as we want. But you want £2 million from me, Andre, £2 million worth of credit. Let's talk, okay?
Well, I just add a couple of words which I've not like replacing Glenn. Today I'm just echoing Glenn, and I just add a couple of words which I've read in the book written by Glenn. Just with my humble interpretation.
That's been of help to anybody. Yeah.
So I used to say that, because that was the question was mentioning whether or not credit will go to sales or finance. I would say that good credit manager never goes to either of these two ways, because credit manager goes, actually he's half financial, half sales.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I used to say, and the different ways to say, and the funniest one, Glenn, it was quite famous in Soviet Union, Truffaltino from Bergamo, is the servant of two masters. So I used to say that credit manager, if he's really a credit manager, not controller, not just a clerk or whatever computer system, which is, allowing to ship if the customer paid, and does not allow to ship if customer didn't pay. I mean, for that, computers could do better than any human being. But when we speak about credit manager, we're supposed to speak about a person who has two bosses, finance director and sales director, and he or she does his job, the job properly only if both of them are simultaneously happy. Otherwise, that's the value of credit manager.
You don't make decisions on limited information. You make decisions on as much information as is available or you can get. And going back to the question of manufacturing, when a salesperson came to me to say, Glenn, such and such a customer wants 60 days, he's currently on 30 days, he wants 60 days. I'm not just looking to see what his payments have been like. I go back to sales and say, well, before we talk about that, what trade discount is he on? How much is he paying for the product? Is he paying what's in the catalogue, or have you negotiated a different price with him? Because if he's on 50% trade discount, he's not going to get any more credit days from me, because all you're doing is, Glenn, can this customer eat into our profit margin even more than he does already? And the answer to that is no. Our profit margin is X percent, and that's based upon 30 days and 50% trade discount. If you change that 50% trade discount to 20% trade discount, I can balance that from 30 days to 60 days, and we've still got the same profit margin. But if I leave the trade discount as it is and increase his credit days, we're just reducing the margin. So before I even look at what his payment habits are and whether he's a good paying customer or not, before I answer your question about can he have extra credit, you answer my question about what's he paying now. Our job, your job is to sell at a profit. My job is to help you sell at a profit. And our job together is to achieve that margin. Not that margin, but that margin. Yeah.
I believe, ladies and gentlemen, you already seen that. The real job of credit manager is not actually process of cash collection or calling customer asking where's our money are, where's our money man. You reflect it. This is the guy who's calling and say where's our money? No, it's not a question. It's not even collection. It's taking care of payment before. That's, by the way, I must repeat. One of the things, one of the very, very first things I learned from Glen and from the book and from credit management is that take care of payment at the time when you decide on customer's order, not later. Not later, because, if you got blocked sales orders, so it's too late to speak because you're already losing money. There is a guy in the truck who is sitting in your warehouse and saying all the 4-letter words about the, warehouse man, warehouse lady, your company, yourself as a credit manager, and so on and so forth. So you're supposed to think before that. And if one day there would be whatever intellect is, who is doing that, there would be still a need of somebody who is able to program that intellect.
Absolutely.
I believe so. Coming back to manufacturing, because Bidisha asked, and this is an interesting thing to say. I mean, we can build a process, but who gonna rebuild that process if there would be if there will be we will be in the need of change for change? You need another Glen or another whoever who gonna rebuild the process, redefine that process, and do it.
What I would recommend in anybody who's got a situation that they don't think is working well is form a working group, a working party. Get a group of people together, the salespeople, in the same way as you would if you were going to write a credit policy. Get everybody involved. Sit round a table, blank piece of paper, brainstorm, whatever method you want to do. Let's talk this through and see what are we doing on the shop. Why are we moving that from there to there? Why isn't the dispatch area there? Why isn't all those things? And there's no reason at all why the credit function is not part of that, because it's part of the credit manager's job to promote profitable sales. And once you've got everybody together and you work out a plan, nobody's going to argue later on because you were all there together around the table and you all agreed. That's the way it's done. I take any challenge as being a challenge, and let's face it. And the worst thing we have in any company, funnily enough, are ourselves, people, because we come across personalities. We call them, because we would do in England, wouldn't we? Because having ruled the world for so long, we come across what we call little Napoleons, little emperors that sit in their area and do things their way and don't let anybody in. No. Get rid of all that. Everybody working together. Like I said earlier on, we're all working together, whether we're a security man on the gate or whether we're the managing director. Our job is to make money, and we make money by meeting customer needs.
And just to make a final conclusion for today, is that if you look at org chart, getting people together, to make org chart working together, we need to put arrows.
Absolutely.
And actually, real job of credit manager is to be master of arrows. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Glenn, I could not express, my gratitude to everything you did for me. But I'm very happy that I had a chance to learn from you, and I believe you will continue to teach, and which is most important, inspire others with your tact, diplomacy, and we didn't mention that today, but
I'm here to help. If anybody, feel free. If anybody wants to, you've got my email address and contact details.
Absolutely.
Yeah, feel free. If anybody asks you, I'm not shy. I won't. The only thing I can't do is I can't speak anything other than English. I can speak a bit of Irish. Sean can tell you that I can speak a bit of Irish.
You speak French? No.
No, there's no need for that kind of talk. We don't.
My apologies. And one advice which Glenn didn't mention, but I believe it is quite important to everybody. And I believe, Glenn, you don't mention that because that's too natural for you. But one thing which is quite useful in credit management on both sides, and positive and negative, please develop a good sense of humor. Use Glenn as a good example of that. Because sometimes when you face bad debt and everything like this, you need to be
to succeed in credit management, to really succeed in the profession, you have to have a personality, and that personality has to. It's not for me to say, but there is an English phrase which is "Don't hide your light under a bushel." You know, if you've got it, flaunt it. You know, like I said, believe in yourself, go forward. You know, stand up and be counted. You'll not succeed. But in look, one of the things that going around knocking on doors taught me, and I guess it taught you the same thing, Andre. When I was 19 years of age and riding around the city of Leeds, knocking on doors, collecting money from consumers, there were a number of occasions when I could have been physically assaulted. It can be quite dangerous. Now, I've never been a physical person.
Yeah.
I am a professional coward. You know, I've got letters after my name to show that I am a coward. But one thing I have been able to do is talk myself out of the situation.
Ladies and gentlemen, to those who were too shy to ask questions today, please don't hesitate to write your questions to Glenn, to me, or put them on social media, and I'll make sure Glenn receives them. And thank you very much for today, Glenn. Thank you very much for letting us to touch to your knowledge, to your inspirational capability, and
you're very welcome.
Us.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shaking your hands, and we'll speak again, I believe.
And England are going to win on Sunday. Just thought I'd mention that.
Well, we will see. We will see.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye. Thank you very much, Glenn.